Shana Tova, everyone. So great to be together and to see all of you. So I was remembering a number of years ago that I was in Jerusalem and I was walking. There's this really terrific pedestrian path that's been developed leading toward the old railway station in Jerusalem. I call it Railway Park. And I was walking along it one day and I saw a series of billboards. They were fantastic. They were kind of like one of these only in Israel types of sites. It was an illustration of 3 teenage girls, and they were sitting together. And I thought, when I first walked past, I thought, oh, that's nice, these girls sitting together, having fun. And then I realized that each one of them was looking down straight into her phone. They were completely isolated from one another. And then, this is what made it an Israeli thing, on the side of the billboard was a quote from the Torah. It said, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for a human being to be alone. I thought it was fantastic modern midrash. A great interpretation of the loneliness that God decries with Adam in the beginning of the Torah in the Garden of Eden. There in Breshit, God realizes that Adam, that first human, cannot be fully realized as a human being without being in relationship with another. And so God creates a helpmate in Eve. We know that today, too, that loneliness and isolation are also keeping us from being our fullest selves. And while I do think that technology, like the cell phones of those teenagers on the billboard, it has some role in that condition of loneliness, our isolation is not just about the tech. It's a tool technology, one that can be used for both blessing and for curse. And we've actually seen, as a congregation, the blessing side of the technology. We think about the ways in which Temple Sholom has nourished our feelings of connection, the opposite of isolation, especially in these past few years. It's quite amazing. So, for example, our weekday minyan that meets on Mondays and Wednesdays has continued uninterrupted since the beginning of the pandemic on Zoom. And the technology has allowed those individuals to stay connected and supported in really remarkable and profound ways. Our JIC class, our Jewish information class, uses WhatsApp to encourage one another, to celebrate milestones, to share pictures of their challah and podcast recommendations, among other things. So many I know and tell us all the time are so grateful for the access to Temple Sholom services streaming into their homes on Shabbat and holidays and right now. But loneliness can happen when, like those teenagers on the bench, we are actually physically proximate to one another. Just because we sit next to one another in shul or go to a lunch or a dinner program, many of us are still lonely. And it's precisely in the most vulnerable times in our lives when we need each other the most. This past spring, I was visiting a sick member of our congregation, and she taught me a new term. I'd never heard it before. Cancer ghosting. Maybe you've heard ghosting. It's a common term in the dating scene, so I hear. It's been a while for me. But that refers to kind of the termination of communication. All of a sudden, poof, gone, vanished like a ghost. Without explanation, no texts, no emails, no nothing. With cancer ghosting, she told me, Friends suddenly just seemed to disappear without explanation when she told them her diagnosis. She told me she felt really disappointed, not in all of her friends. She said some were remarkable, but some who she didn't anticipate, who stopped checking in. It was something I heard not just once. I've heard from other people over the years, and I thought, it's a good topic for a drosh. It's a point of pain that I have been hearing, people experiencing some of the hardest moments in their lives, a devastating health diagnosis, a loss in the family, divorce, struggles with addiction, just to name a few examples. Too many people feel alone in their sadness and ghosted by those they know and love. And sometimes even when people, their friends, do show up, that people avoid talking about what's at the center of their lives to push aside their discomfort. In a 2020 survey of cancer patients in an online forum, 65% of respondents said that their friends or relatives had disappeared or cut contact after their diagnosis. Psychologists are beginning to explore the ways that we respond to other people's trauma. Barbara Circus, who's a professor at Stanford School of Medicine, says that we all live in some degree of terror of bad things happening to us. And when you're confronted by someone else's horror, it's scary. That feelings of vulnerability can lead sometimes to survivor's guilt, and sometimes even a sense of shame of that reaction, which then can lead to avoid people in crisis. But we know that most of life's challenges are not contagious. Pain and sadness are a part of life that are part of our human condition. We don't avoid because we don't care. We do care. We avoid because we're scared. We're scared to say the wrong thing, to freeze, to make things worse. And without meaning to do so, we make it about us and not about the person who needs us. When I encounter this fear and resistance in myself, and I do, it's a human reaction, I always come back to a teaching from the Talmud. I usually come back to a teaching from the Talmud, that's me, but this is a good one. Rabbi Chia was suffering, and Rabbi Yochanan, what did he do to his friend? He gave him his hand, and Rabbi Chia was lifted. What's so striking about this is there's nothing in it that tells us we have to say something. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say a word to his friend Rabbi Chia, he just holds his hand. And in that touch, the simple act of showing up, there is comfort. In our willingness to simply show up, to go, to visit a friend, to stop in a house of mourning, to make that phone call, we bring the gift of our presence. If we go back to that verse from the billboard, from the Garden of Eden, we know that once Eve was created as a helpmate for Adam, that quickly they actually became lost from one another. The Torah teaches us that they heard the faintest sound of God's presence in the wind rustling through the garden, and their first instinct was to hide themselves. But God called out to them in the soft breeze with a question, Ayeka, where are you? It was not a question of physical location. God knew where they were, after all. It's God. But it was a question calling to them, and to us, I would say, each generation as we read Torah, calling us to presence, to come out from hiding and to show up. Judaism teaches us that the proper answer to that question, Ayeka, where are you, is Hineni, here I am, ready to meet this next moment as it is unfolding, to show up first for myself, not hiding what's true for me in any given moment, and then to open to others through connection. We learn over and over again when God calls, the answer is Hineni. We'll read tomorrow morning Abraham say Hineni when God instructs him to go up that mountain. Moshe answers Hineni as God calls to him from the burning bush. The prophet Isaiah the same, Hineni, when God invites him to bring prophecy to Israel. My teacher, Rabbi Norman Cohen, suggests that when our ancestors said Hineni, their words reflected the ability to be present, to act on behalf of others, to sacrifice for someone or something higher. In other words, Hineni doesn't just mean here I am. It means I'm here, I am present, and I am ready to do whatever you need. As we start this new year of Rosh Hashanah 5783, we think about how we might reorient ourselves to hear the call of those closest to us and to respond, Hineni, here I am. We know how to attend a shiva, to bring a meal, to make a donation. These are all beautiful and important gestures. But to show up and be meaningfully present, we need to do better. The Jewish feminist writer Letty Cotton Pogrebin wrote a book all about this. It has a great title, How to Be a Friend to a Friend Who is Sick. In it, she wrote, "Illness is friendship's proving ground, the uncharted territory where one's actions may be the least sure-footed, but also the most indelible." And she teaches that there are three things that when we don't know what to say, we know to bring a hand, like Rabbi Chia, but we don't know what to say, that there are three things that she has found that can be helpful when approaching someone, a friend who's sick. Number one, tell me what's helpful and what's not. Number two, tell me if you want to be alone and when you want company. And number three, tell me what to bring and when to leave. Sometimes just a little bit of instruction can help us know how to open, how to be present, how to be there in that direct and open way. Everyone encounters the loneliness of the heart. That's part of what makes us human. But not everyone is fortunate enough to receive the antidote, the blessing of connection, the blessing of presence and companionship. We need the blessings of one another. Our tradition teaches us that God seeks connection, and so do we. When those we see around us, our loved ones, our friends, our sacred community members ask us, Ayeka, where are you? Let's find ways to respond with that word, Hineni, here I am. Shana Tova.